Unfiltered with the Economic Brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday.
Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Preeti Kaur. Coming up in the next 1 hour. G20 leaders in Rio unite to tackle global crisis and promote sustainable growth. Call for humanitarian aid in Gaza and Lebanon amid escalating conflicts. Prime Minister Narendra Modi highlights India's efforts to alleviate hunger and poverty at G20 in Brazil. Also calls for addressing the challenges faced by global South countries. Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds talks with Presidents Prabowo Subianto of Indonesia and Emmanuel Macron of France and Prime Ministers Luis Montenegro of Portugal and Giorgia Meloni of Italy. Russia-Ukraine conflict marks the 1,000th day. Ukraine says conflict must be brought to a just end in 2025. Lebanon Hezbollah agreed to U.S. proposal for ceasefire with Israel. U.S. envoy to travel to Beirut for further talks. G20 leaders attending the summit in Brazil released G20 Rio de Janeiro leaders' declaration outlining their concerns over major global challenges and crises. Besides, leaders also talked about steps for social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty. As per the leaders' declaration, the leaders underscored the G20 commitment to the importance of food security and nutrition and of the progressive realization of the right to adequate food as reaffirmed through the Deccan High-Level Principles. The G20 group also launched the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. The leaders called for speedy implementation of the G20 2023 Action Plan on accelerating progress on the SDGs. The leaders also expressed deep concern about humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip and the escalation in Lebanon. While talking about the war in Ukraine, the leaders highlighted human suffering and negative added impacts of the war with regards to global food and security, energy security in particular, supply chains, macro financial stability, inflation and growth. The leaders condemned terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. The leaders also recommitted to advancing the goal of a world free of nuclear weapons and a safer place for all and will uphold obligations in this regard. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the G20 session on social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty in Rio de Janeiro. Prime Minister spoke about India's efforts to alleviate hunger and poverty. Sharing India's success story, Prime Minister said that the main reason for India's success is its approach back to basics and march to the future.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the G20 session on social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The Prime Minister spoke on a number of issues, including India's efforts to alleviate hunger and poverty, amplifying the concerns of the Global South, push for sustainable development goals. The Prime Minister said that the people-centric decisions taken at the G20 summit in New Delhi have been taken forward during Brazil's presidency. The Prime Minister expressed satisfaction over prioritizing SDG goals. The Prime Minister said that India focused on inclusive development, women-led development, and youth power and gave wings to the hopes and aspirations of the Global South. The Prime Minister noted that it is clear that one Earth, one family, one future is as relevant at this summit as it was last year. The Prime Minister also shared India's experiences and success stories. He said that over the last 10 years, India lifted 250 million people out of poverty, while over 800 million people are being given food grains free of cost. 550 million people are benefiting from the world's biggest health insurance scheme. Now, 60 million senior citizens over the age of 70 will also be able to benefit from free health insurance. maintaining a focus on women-led development and social inclusion. Over 300 million women micro-entrepreneurs have been linked to banks and given access to credit. Under the world's largest crop insurance scheme, over 40 million farmers have received benefits worth 20 billion US dollars. Under the farmer scheme, assistance worth over $40 billion has been given to 110 million farmers. Institutional credit worth 300 billion US dollars is being given to farmers. India is not only ensuring food security but also focusing on nutrition. The Saksham Anganwadi and Nutrition 2.0 campaign, which is an integrated nutrition support program, focuses in particular on nutrition for pregnant women, newborn babies, children under the age of 6, and adolescent girls. Through the midday meal scheme, special attention is also being paid to the nutritional needs of school going children. The Prime Minister said that India is also contributing to global food security. India provided humanitarian assistance to Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe recently. The Prime Minister noted that the main reason for our success is our approach back to basics and march to the future. PM Modi remarked that we have focused not only on natural farming and organic farming, but also on new technologies. Besides, India also focused on sustainable agriculture, protection of the environment, nutrition, and food security by promoting Shri Ann or millets. India developed more than 2,000 climate resilient crop varieties and has started the Digital Agriculture Mission. India's digital public infrastructure enables social and financial inclusion. Besides, India created a new model for inclusive development that strengthens the weakest link with the aspirational districts and blocks project. The Prime Minister also said that India supports Brazil's initiative for a global alliance against hunger and poverty. This is an important step towards the implementation of the Deccan High-Level Principles for Food Security adopted at the New Delhi summit. The Prime Minister also highlighted the concerns of the Global South, saying that the countries of the Global South are most adversely impacted by the food, fuel, and fertilizer crises caused by global conflicts. He said that discussions can only be successful when we keep in mind the challenges and priorities of the Global South. And just as we amplify the voice of the Global South by granting permanent membership of G20 to the African Union during the New Delhi summit, we will reform institutions of global governance. With input from Gautam Roy in Brazil, Fuzail Ahmed reporting for DD India.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi held bilateral meetings with a number of world leaders on the sidelines of G20 summit in Brazil. Prime Minister met with French President Emmanuel Macron, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. He also met Portuguese counterpart Luis Montenegro and Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto. We get to more details in this report.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi held bilateral meetings with a number of world leaders on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Prime Minister held talks with the French President Emmanuel Macron. The leaders agreed to advance cooperation between both countries in sectors such as space, defense, energy, technology and more. The leaders talked about how India and France will keep working closely in sectors like space, energy, AI, and other such futuristic areas. Prime Minister also complimented Macron on the successful hosting of the Paris Olympics and the Paralympics earlier this year. Prime Minister also met with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Prime Minister termed his meeting as extremely productive. Prime Minister said that for India, the comprehensive strategic partnership with the UK is of immense priority. Prime Minister added that in the coming years, both countries are eager to work closely in areas such as technology, green energy, security, innovation. Prime Minister also held a bilateral meeting with his Portuguese counterpart Luis Montenegro. The talks focused on adding more vigor to economic linkages. Sectors like renewable energy and green hydrogen offer many opportunities for more collaboration. The leaders also talked about strong defense relations, people-to-people linkages and other such subjects. Prime Minister noted that India cherishes the long-standing ties with Portugal. Besides, Prime Minister Modi also met with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni on the sidelines of the G20 summit. The talks centered around deepening ties in defense, security, trade, and technology. Leaders also talked about how to boost cooperation in culture, education, and other such areas. Prime Minister said that India-Italy friendship can greatly contribute to a better planet. Besides, Prime Minister also met with Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store. The discussions focused on ways to deepen India-Norway bilateral relations, particularly in trade and economic cooperation after the signing of the India-EFTA TEPA. The leaders also exchanged views on geopolitical issues. Prime Minister held a bilateral meeting with the Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto. Taking to social media platform, Prime Minister said that this year is special for both countries as we are marking 75 years of diplomatic relations. Talks focused on improving ties in commerce, security, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, among others. Fuzail Ahmed's report for DD India.
All right, DD India correspondent Gautam Roy joins us with more from Rio de Janeiro. Gautam, good morning. Tell us what stood out on day one of the G20 summit.
But it was indeed a packed day for all the G20 leaders in terms of day one and how they went through two sessions and also came together to announce and launch the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. Prime Minister Modi himself had 6 bilaterals, which started with Indonesia and then ended with UK, with 4 other countries in the middle, including Italy, and we also had Norway as well as Portugal. But if you talk about the biggest takeaway was first, of course, the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. 82 countries on board. If you talk about institutions, that number nearly doubles, and they will collectively now take action to ensure that the world is without hunger and poverty in the course of the next few years. The other was that a consensus was indeed forged on day one itself between the Sherpas, who really negotiate and represent the countries when it comes to putting across a statement of intent and purpose that the leaders themselves endorse, which is the Rio Declaration. Remember last year in New Delhi, the declaration had again come out on day one itself, and here too it has happened on day one, and a lot of these issues which were said to be getting in the way of forming a consensus, they have been expressed in a very, very measured, well thought out manner.
All right, Gautam, now today will be the second day. What's in store for Prime Minister Modi and other leaders on the second day of the engagements?
On day two as well, a lot of activity planned really in terms of Prime Minister Modi as far as his engagements are concerned. More bilateral engagements on the annual. They've not been confirmed yet, but there could be as many as 4 or 5. Apart from that, the IPSA could have a meeting as well. That's India, Brazil and South Africa, a grouping that has been the troika as well as far as the G20 summit is concerned. Apart from that, there's a session on energy transition and sustainable development as well, which Prime Minister Modi will be participating in along with the other leaders. So there's more to come as far as this G20 summit is concerned, because that is one area, energy transition, which is crucial to how the world responds to climate change. Sustainable development is again an issue where a lot of funds need to be mobilized, keeping in mind that development is taken on a track where it gels well with the environment as well. So a lot of funding in that arena too, apart from responding to the kind of disasters that are taking place because of climate change. That is another track that could further be elaborated.
All right, Gautam, thank you for joining in. And US President Joe Biden on Monday made a historic pledge of $4 billion to the World Bank's International Development Association, that is IDA, fund for the world's poorest countries. Biden announced the US pledge during the final address to the Group of 20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. The amount exceeds the $3.5 billion that Washington committed in the previous IDA replenishment round in December 2021.
I'm proud to announce the United States is pledging $4 billion over the next 3 years to the World Bank's International Development Association. As my friend Ajay tells you, the IDA is the first responder to the world's poorest countries. I encourage everyone around this table to increase their pledges in December.
Malaysia and Brazil pledged to work together for a reinvigorated multilateral system rooted in the principles of the United Nations Charter and international law. The joint statement was issued following a bilateral meeting between Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim and Brazil President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva on the sidelines of the G20 summit. Both the leaders emphasized the need for a reformed global governance that is more representative, democratic, effective, transparent and accountable. You're watching DD India News Hour. We're heading for a short break. But after the break, United States comes down heavily on Russia for escalating the conflict in Ukraine by deploying North Korean troops. Russia vetoes UN Security Council action on Sudan war that envisaged parties to cease hostilities and engage in dialogue to de-escalate the conflict. Indigenous protesters in New Zealand protest to defend indigenous rights against perceived threats.
G20 meeting taking place in Rio on the 18th and 19th of this month. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be participating here as well, along with the leaders of the world's 20 largest economies who will be deliberating on key issues such as eliminating hunger and poverty, sustainable development. For all the latest on the 2024 G20 summit in Rio, join me, Gautam Roy, only on DD India.
Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India News Hour. Shifting focus, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has reached its 1,000th day on Tuesday, leaving human and economic scars on both the sides. The fight continues with exhausted forces fighting on many fronts, Kyiv under constant drone and missile attacks, and politicians getting ready for Donald Trump to retake the White House in January. Earlier, in a boost for the conflict-stricken country, U.S. President Joe Biden gave the green light for the U.S. missiles to be used against targets deeper inside Russia, potentially limiting the options to launch attacks and supply the front. Though President Zelensky hoped to do its best to end the conflict next year through diplomatic means, but he has emphatically shut down any talk of a ceasefire before proper security guarantees are provided to Ukraine. Meanwhile, to help its ally Ukraine in the ongoing conflict, the United States will announce additional security assistance for its ally Ukraine in the coming days. The decision was made as Russia-Ukraine conflict marks the 1,000th day.
The United States will continue to surge security assistance to Ukraine, including artillery, air defense, armored vehicles, and other needed capabilities and munitions. And we will announce additional security assistance for Ukraine in the days to come. Because ultimately, supporting Ukraine in Congress and beyond it cannot be and should not be a partisan issue. Standing up for democracy and human rights is above petty politics and outlasts any one leader or term.
French President Emmanuel Macron has praised Biden's decision of allowing Ukraine the use of US-made weapons to strike inside Russia and called it a good decision.
Paris, je pense que notre devoir est d'aider l'Ukraine à résister.
It was a decision that was a totally good one. I understand. It was also triggered by a grave change in the conflict which should not be underestimated, which is the entry of North Korean troops alongside Russia on what is European soil. Russia was the only power making an escalation in this conflict today. So it's really a sudden change in this war that led to the Americans' decision.
Des troupes nord-coréennes aux côtés de la Russie.
United States has blamed Russia for escalating the conflict in Ukraine by deploying North Korean troops. The statement came after Kremlin warned that Washington would deepen its involvement in the war by allowing Kyiv's forces to strike far into Russia with US-made weapons. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller in a briefing reiterated that the US will always adapt and adjust the capabilities we provide to Ukraine when it's appropriate to do so. All right, turning focus to West Asia now. Lebanon and Hezbollah have agreed to a U.S. proposal for a ceasefire with Israel as Beirut residents grapple with intensifying Israeli strikes. A senior Lebanese official confirmed on Monday that a U.S. envoy is set to visit Lebanon on Tuesday for discussions on a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. The visit, led by White House envoy Amos Hochstein, is expected to build on a U.S. ceasefire proposal submitted to Lebanon last week. However, the visit has not yet been officially confirmed by Washington. There was no immediate comment from Israel on Lebanon's latest assessment of diplomacy. Israel hit targets in Beirut city limits for the first time in more than 5 weeks, killing 10 people in 2 separate strikes, including Hezbollah's top media official. World powers have said the ceasefire must be based on UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which ended a 2006 conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel's retaliatory attack on Iran last month degraded its defense and missile production capabilities and also hit an element of its nuclear program. However, Netanyahu added that Iran's path to a nuclear weapon has not been blocked. Netanyahu's Iran remark was made at the Knesset, Israel's parliament, during a session that was called upon in order to discuss 101 hostages still held by Hamas.
We will still be tested for our ability to thwart the Iranian nuclear program. It's not a secret. It was published. There is a specific component in their nuclear program that was hit in this attack.
Members of the United Nations Security Council, including the United States and the United Kingdom, urged an immediate increase in aid to the civilians in Gaza, warning that the situation in the Palestinian enclave is getting worse. Meanwhile, the United States warned Turkey on Monday against hosting Hamas leadership, saying there can be no more business as usual with what the U.S. designates as a terrorist organization. U.S. officials said that they are closely monitoring Israel's actions to improve the conditions for Palestinian civilians while engaging with Israeli leaders every single day. Russia on Monday vetoed a United Nations Security Council draft resolution that called on Sudan's warring parties to cease hostilities immediately and ensure the delivery of humanitarian aid. All other countries of the 15-member council, including China, voted in favor of the measures drafted by Britain and Sierra Leone. Russia was the sole member to vote against it. The draft resolution called on the parties to immediately cease hostilities and engage in dialogue to agree to the steps to de-escalate the conflict. Russia accused the United Kingdom of attempting to meddle in Sudanese affairs. He accused backers of the draft resolution of double standards. The UN says nearly 25 million people need aid as famine has taken hold in displacement camps and 11 million people have fled their homes. Germany and Finland launched a probe on Monday after an undersea cable linking the countries was severed, warning of the threat of hybrid warfare amid heightened tensions with Russia. The country's foreign minister said in a joint statement that they were deeply concerned by the cutting of the communication link through the Baltic Sea, where tensions have increased since Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. The warning came after a joint investigation by the public broadcasters of Sweden, Denmark, Norway and Finland. The incidents come just weeks after the United States warned that it had detected increased Russian military activity around key undersea cables. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump on Monday named former Congressman and Fox Business host John Duffy as his pick for Transportation Secretary in the next administration. In a statement announcing Duffy, Trump described the Wisconsin Republican as a tremendous and well-liked public servant. If confirmed, Duffy will oversee aviation, automotive, rail, transit and other transportation policies at the department with about $110 billion budget. Trump has vowed to reverse the Biden administration's vehicle emissions rules. He has said that he plans to begin the process of undoing the Biden administration's stringent emissions regulations finalized earlier this year as soon as he takes office. Meanwhile, the judge at Donald Trump's New York criminal case is expected to decide on Tuesday whether the U.S. president-elect will face sentencing or escape punishment despite being convicted by a jury. Trump was convicted of 34 felony counts in May after a jury found that he had fraudulently manipulated business records to cover up an alleged sexual encounter with a porn star ahead of the 2016 election. Prosecutors argued that concealing the alleged tryst was intended to help him with his first run for the White House. Trump, who had been scheduled to be sentenced on November 26, may receive a reprieve if Judge Juan Merchant decides to dismiss the case following the Supreme Court's recent ruling on presidential immunity. That landmark ruling saw the court, with a 6-3 conservative majority, decide that presidents have sweeping immunity from prosecution for a range of official acts committed while in office. Demonstrators in Georgia's capital have set up tents on a central thoroughfare and demanded new parliamentary elections in the country. Georgia's opposition have refused to accept the parliamentary election results and have alleged widespread ballot rigging and voting irregularities. Protesters also appealed to the international community for support as the country grapples with political unrest. Official results from the October 26 ballot gave a 54% majority to Georgian Dream Party, whose opponents say it wants to steer the Caucasus nation away from Europe and back into Russia's orbit. Thousands of Maori and their supporters have marched for 9 days across New Zealand, culminating today in a rally in Wellington. With flags flying and music filling the air, the protest has a festival-like energy, but stakes are high. Over 15,000 are marching towards Parliament, where 2,000 have already gathered to oppose a controversial bill. At the heart of the protest is a 184-year-old Treaty of Waitangi, a historic agreement between the British Crown and Maori chiefs that underpins New Zealand's governance. Protesters argue the bill dilutes Maori rights by reinterpreting key clauses in the treaty. The demonstration highlights a fierce determination to defend indigenous rights against perceived threats. Thousands of British farmers will march in London to protest against the decision by the UK government to end a key inheritance tax exemption. The exemption has long been vital in helping families to pass down farmland to the next generation without the burden of substantial taxes. Finance Minister Rachel Reeves announced in October that farmers with land worth more than $1.26 million will no longer be able to leave their farms to their children tax-free from 2026. Farmers say the change will threaten the viability of family farms. French farmers escalated protests against the European Union-Mercosur trade agreement, citing fears of unfair competition. Backed by their government, they argued the deal would threaten their livelihoods by allowing a surge of South American agricultural imports produced under less stringent environmental standards. In northern France, dozens of farmers with about 50 tractors disrupted traffic before walling up a government office tasked with enforcing environmental standards. The protesters dumped manure and tires in front of the building and moved to the local prefecture, where they set up a noisy camp with firecrackers. You're watching DD India News Hour. We're heading for a short break, but after the break, we will tell you about all that's happening at the COP29 summit underway in Azerbaijan's Baku as it advances health climate commitments. A strong call is being made at COP29 for global action to safeguard future generations. Philippines battered by Man-yi, the 6th storm to hit the country in a span of 1 month. Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India News Hour. G20 leaders in Rio unite to tackle global crisis and promote sustainable growth. Call for humanitarian aid in Gaza and Lebanon amid escalating conflicts. Prime Minister Narendra Modi highlights India's efforts to alleviate hunger and poverty at G20 in Brazil. Also calls for addressing the challenges faced by global South countries. Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds talks with Presidents Prabowo Subianto of Indonesia and Emmanuel Macron of France. He also holds talks with Prime Ministers Luis Montenegro of Portugal and Giorgia Meloni of Italy. Russia-Ukraine conflict marks the 1,000th day. Ukraine says conflict must be brought to a just end in 2025. Lebanon, Hezbollah agreed to U.S. proposal for ceasefire with Israel. U.S. envoy to travel to Beirut for further talks. And now let's get you updates from the COP29 summit that is underway in Azerbaijan's Baku. On Monday, the letter of intent officially establishing the Baku COP presidency's Continuity Coalition for Climate and Health was signed. WHO Director General said the initiative unites the visionary leadership of 5 COP presidencies that span this critical time for action, underscoring a commitment to elevate health within the climate agenda. He also added that this coalition represents a collective will to prioritize climate and health now and for the future. At the COP29, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure announced a total of $8 million in funding for 12 projects across 18 small island development states in the Caribbean, Pacific and Indian Oceans at the COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. The funds pooled from India, Australia, EU and the UK mainly support infrastructure and capacity building. The funds will be implemented for projects such as strengthening resilience of key infrastructures like schools, hospitals, power systems, health, water security and many more. The funds are expected to get disbursed within the next 4 months.
Today we have announced the second grant, which is going to 18 countries for 12 projects. We want to make sure that we are supporting the right kinds of projects that are supporting innovative, good quality infrastructure resilient.
Also, the Green Climate Funds have partnered with the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment through funding and the empowerment of Pacific youth in leading campaigns on climate action in their respective countries. The Academy will support about 60 Pacific Islanders aged 18 to 30 to launch and drive public-facing campaigns to scale up climate action that is in tune with their respective cultures and traditions. GCF and SPREOs believe that involving and supporting youth climate fights with funding is fitting and long overdue.
Will enable Pacific Islanders to identify, capture and tell their own stories of climate adaptation, mitigation, resilience and most importantly justice. Stories that will inform and inspire their own communities and those further afield. At the same time, this multi-year initiative will create employment opportunities and professional pathways for young Pacific Islanders across various disciplines, including digital marketing, project management and creative design.
Meanwhile, young climate leaders from around the world convened at COP29 to address the pressing issue of climate entrepreneurship in Global South. They discussed strategies to drive sustainable change and taking action to reduce the strain on the planet. At the COP29 meeting, participants called for increased investment in female-led initiatives. Some speakers even proposed the creation of a dedicated women's bank to provide much-needed financial resources to address climate-related challenges. Participants believe that by empowering young climate entrepreneurs, their potential to create a more sustainable future can be tapped. Children are also part of the climate solution, and it will require their basic human rights of involvement and space in the decision-making of COP29. This was the highlight of the UNICEF press conference at COP29, where children joined the panel and shared their views on many related issues, including climate impacts on children's health, physical well-being and education. Youth environment activists say children needed to be included for effective actions.
And that's why we need your help to create a future where no child has to choose between their health and education, where no child drinks unsafe water or misses school because of climate-related issues, where every child has the chance to grow up healthy and educated.
Air pollution, a silent scourge undermining global health, has a particularly devastating impact on women and children. The consequences are numerous and severe, including premature births, chronic respiratory diseases, and impaired neurodevelopment in young children. Children whose respiratory and immune systems are still developing are particularly vulnerable to the effects of pollution. The subject resonated on the sidelines of COP29 summit in Baku. A discussion at the United Nations Pavilion highlighted the close link between health and climate. The emphasis was on the importance of integrating health issues into climate policies. India, meanwhile, made a strong intervention at the UN Climate Summit, urging decisive action on climate change. Highlighting urgent priorities, India called for barrier-free technology transfer, equitable climate finance, stronger international cooperation and mutual trust. DT India's Tapas Bhattacharya gets us more details.
In a decisive intervention at the 2024 annual high-level ministerial roundtable on pre-2030 climate ambition, India has emphasized bold steps to combat climate change at COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. Representing India, Leena Nandan, Secretary of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, highlighted alarming facts from the 2024 NDC synthesis report. She warned that 86% of the global carbon budget for 2020-2030 is on track to be used up, underscoring the urgency for decisive action. India outlined a 4-point agenda to drive global climate action. First, it stressed the need for barrier-free technology transfer, calling for the removal of intellectual property restrictions on green innovations. Access to affordable, adaptable, and locally relevant technologies is critical for developing nations. Second, climate finance remains central. Developed nations must fulfill overdue commitments, ensuring equitable and accessible funding to support clean energy and disaster-resilient infrastructure in the global south. Third, India called for enhanced international cooperation to ensure cost-effective and scalable mitigation efforts. It cautioned against unilateral trade measures that unfairly burden developing nations. Finally, India highlighted the importance of mutual trust. Developed nations must lead with meaningful action, fostering trust to achieve climate ambitions by 2030. Despite challenges, India remains optimistic. With 195 parties submitting NDCs, global emissions are projected to peak before 2030. However, the success of this ambition hinges on robust financial resources, technology transfer, and capacity building. India's call to action at COP29 is clear. Climate solutions must be just, equitable, and collaborative. Tapas Bhattacharya's report for DD India.
At least 8 people were killed as Super Typhoon Man-yi hit the Philippines archipelago over the weekend, unleashing fierce winds and strong rains that triggered landslides and storm surges, authorities said. Man-yi is the 6th storm to hit the country in a span of 1 month. The local government has appealed for aid to help the affected residents rebuild their homes. On average, about 20 tropical storms strike the Philippines each year, bringing heavy rains, strong winds, flooding and landslides. Tropical storm Sara begins to move away from Honduras after leaving 1 dead, over 50,000 affected and destroying bridges. Storm Sara caused widespread flooding and infrastructure damage, leaving communities isolated in northern Honduras. Heavy rains led to the collapse of a vital bridge over a swollen river in the coastal town of La Ceiba, which cut off access to the entire community. The relentless rains that began overnight on Friday have swelled rivers, flooded homes and caused many destruction. Pollution hit record level in Lahore, causing severe health concerns. Also, a health emergency has been declared in Pakistan's second biggest city of Lahore, which is seeing unprecedented level of air pollution. The smog clouds have been so thick that they've been visible from space. Hospitals have reported a surge in cases of asthma and other breathing disorders. You're watching DD Indian News. We're heading for a short break, but after the break, in sports, tennis legend Rafael Nadal all set for Davis Cup action before putting an end to his storied career. Saudi Arabia unveils the first look of King Salman's stadium that's set to be the showpiece of the 2034 FIFA World Cup. And Croatian divers tackle underwater waste in a cleanup procedure.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy, always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the economic brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD.
Welcome back. After the break, you're watching DD India News Hour. In a significant move to bolster its disaster management capabilities, the Indian Army is hosting Exercise Sanyukt Vimochan 2024, a joint humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, or the HADR exercise. The exercise between India and friendly foreign countries is based on the theme Cyclone in Coastal Region of Gujarat. The exercise is centered on a simulated disaster scenario involving a cyclone impacting the Okha Porbandar coastline in Gujarat. Its primary focus is to identify and address gaps in intra-agency integration and cooperation, ensuring a swift and coordinated response to natural disasters. The annual exercise is part of Indian Army's initiative to promote collaborative strategies for disaster response. Nepal and India have agreed to better coordinate on border security and reviewed the work done in the past year in managing related challenges. The 8th India-Nepal SSP-APF coordination meeting concluded on Monday. Also, it agreed to ensure smooth movement of citizens of both the countries across the open borders. The three-day meeting concluded to take more effective measures on border crime control, information exchange, revenue leakage control, drug smuggling and control of the illegal entry of third country citizens. Work will also be done to make border security more organized, decriminalizing the no man's land area and taking joint initiatives to control human trafficking and gold smuggling. A 251-member delegation from Nepal handed over the invitation letter to Champath Rai, General Secretary of Ram Mandir Trust, to visit Janakpur Dham on the occasion of Janaki Bibah Mahotsav. Now, the delegation included Chief Minister of Madhesh Province, Satish Kumar Singh, set out for the Sri Ram Temple at Ayodhya in northern state of Uttar Pradesh from Birganj of Nepal on Sunday to hand over the invitations to the Indian guests. The Janaki Bibah Mahotsav will be held in Nepal's Janakpur Dham on December 6th. The Janaki Bibah Mahotsav is the customary enactment of the marriage ceremony between Sita or Janaki with Hindu god Ram. India Coast Guard rescued 7 fishermen apprehended by Pakistan Maritime Security Agency near the India-Pakistan maritime boundary on November 17th. ICG swiftly responded to the distress call, intercepted PMSA and ensured the safe return of the crew. ICG remains committed to safeguarding India's maritime community. As the national capital continues to grapple with severe air pollution and persistent haze, authorities at the Delhi Zoo have implemented measures to protect the animals from the adverse effects of deteriorating air quality. Special arrangements like water sprinklers are being used in the zoo to mitigate the effects of air pollution. Besides, heaters have also been installed to keep them warm during winters. Authorities say that wild animals are being given a winter diet that includes foods rich in fat as well. The Indian Army is currently conducting a mini marathon in Poonch, Jammu and Kashmir, and it is quickly becoming a highly anticipated event that brings together Army personnel, local residents and fitness enthusiasts from across the region. They celebrate unity, fitness and national pride and are set against the stunning backdrop of the Pir Panjal mountain range and the picturesque valleys of Poonch. Let's get to business updates now. The International Monetary Fund delegation met Sri Lankan President Anurakumara Dissanayake and key ministers of the newly formed government at the Presidential Secretariat on Monday. President Dissanayake urged the IMF to maintain a balanced approach that considers the hardships faced by citizens. He assured that under his leadership, social spending allocations would be utilized effectively. The IMF team is assessing economic policies, progress on ongoing reforms and the implementation of previous agreements with the IMF. Upon successful completion of the review, the global lender is expected to release the next installment of the loan worth $330 million to Sri Lanka. The IMF had approved a $2.9 billion extended fund facility available to Sri Lanka over 48 months in tranches. The Global Freight Summit 2024 commenced in Dubai on November 18th, marking its third edition since its inception in 2022. The three-day event has attracted more than 5,000 industry leaders from 155 countries, representing diverse sectors of the global supply chain industry. This year's summit centers on the theme, Acting Today to Reach the Opportunities of Tomorrow. The event has drawn significant participation from Indian corporations, technology giants Wipro, Tech Mahindra and SRM Tech, along with dozens of other corporations and entrepreneurs are making their presence felt at the summit. Adding prominence to the Indian presence, cricket icon Sachin Tendulkar, Bollywood superstar Shah Rukh Khan are scheduled to participate in the panel discussions. A key focus of this year's discussion is the implementation of practical digital solutions while addressing potential challenges in technological transition.
Here at the DP World Global Freight Conference, this is an excellent opportunity to network with the like-minded people, to get the insights into the shipping, logistics and freight industry. You're also meeting your potential clients and customers. And Dubai, being at such a strategic place, Dubai has built the whole place based on its logistics strategic positioning. It cuts across, it touches with Europe, it touches upon the Arabian Peninsula, and the eastern side, you have whole Indian continent. So it's a strategic location to connect, and this is what the supply chain do. Today's supply chains are global, interconnected, and you need a node which can optimize the trades going across the globe.
The Nasdaq and S&P 500 closed higher on Monday, recovering some losses as investors anticipate quarterly earnings from AI leader Nvidia, and Tesla jumped on the prospect of favorable policy changes from the incoming Trump administration. Nvidia will report third quarter earnings on Wednesday, when investors will assess demand for chips and the sustainability of the AI euphoria that drove much of the market's rally this year. The chip designer, which powered 20% of the S&P 500's return over the past year, is expected to drive nearly 25% of its EPS growth in the third quarter. The S&P 500 gained 0.39%, while the Nasdaq Composite gained 0.6%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 0.13%. Asian stocks too rose on Tuesday, with benchmark indices advancing in Japan, South Korea and Australia, while futures climbed in Hong Kong. Japan's Nikkei added 0.2%, while South Korea's Kospi and Australia's equity benchmark each ticked up 0.1%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng climbed 0.8% and mainland blue chips gained 0.3%. You're watching DD India News Hour. Up next, we get to you updates from the world of sports. The season-ending Davis Cup 2024 final, scheduled to start in Spain on Tuesday, promises to be an emotional affair for the tennis world, as Rafael Nadal is set to bid farewell to the sport after the campaign on home soil. The 22 times Grand Slam champion announced in October that he would retire after representing his country for the final time on home soil in Malaga, bringing an end to one of the greatest careers the sport has seen. However, it is still remaining to be seen whether Nadal is fit enough to play a singles match for Spain against the Netherlands, or whether he once again teams up with Carlos Alcaraz for the doubles. Argentina will host Peru in their next FIFA World Cup qualifier at Alberto Armando Stadium in Buenos Aires on Tuesday. Inter Miami star Lionel Messi and his national teammate trained ahead of the match off the back of a shock 2-1 loss away to Paraguay last week. World Cup holders Argentina currently top CONMEBOL qualifying with 22 points from 11 games, while Peru is 9th on 7 points. The top 6 teams will qualify automatically for the 2026 World Cup hosted by the US, Mexico and Canada. Saudi Arabia has unveiled its design plans for the King Salman Stadium, a 92,000 capacity facility in Riyadh set to be the showpiece at the 2034 FIFA World Cup. The Saudi Sports Ministry unveiled a promotional video made with computer-generated imagery to offer a first look at the stadium, which is scheduled to be completed in the fourth quarter of 2029. The stadium is set to serve as the main base of the Saudi national team and will be part of a sports complex featuring an indoor sports hall, an Olympic-sized pool and other facilities as well. Although still not officially confirmed by FIFA, Saudi Arabia are almost certain to win the rights to host 2034 World Cup, having been the only country to formally submit a bid before the deadline in late 2023. In football, Rahul Beke helped India to secure a 1-each draw against Malaysia in an international friendly in Hyderabad on Monday. Goalkeeper Gurpreet Singh Sandhu erred in the 19th minute to allow Paulo Jose pass the ball into an empty net. Defender Rahul Beke beat his man and thumped a header into the back of the net 20 minutes later. As far as the head-to-head record is concerned, India and Malaysia have both won 12 matches each, with 9 matches ending in draws. Royal Challengers Bengaluru on Monday announced the appointment of Omkar Salvi as the IPL franchise's bowling coach. The 46-year-old guided Mumbai to Ranji Trophy and Irani Trophy titles last season. Salvi took over as the head coach of the Mumbai team for the 2023-24 season, where he led it to its historic Ranji title. Now, this was Mumbai's first in 8 years and its 42nd overall. Before this, he spent 4 seasons as the team's bowling coach, further cementing his reputation as a key architect of success. Omkar will join RCB in time for IPL 2025 after completion of his Indian domestic season duties. Volunteer divers took to the waters of Milna Bay on the Croatian island of Brač, participating in an underwater cleanup effort organized by a local diving club. Marking the 4th such initiative this year, the project aims to address the urgent need for action to protect the fragile marine ecosystem. Alright, with that we end this edition of DD India News Hour. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those of you on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. And this app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can download the respective QR codes on your screens. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Preeti Kaur signing off, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.